of you sort of touched on this during your opening remarks, but with such busy agendas in front of you for each of your respective positions, why has CAV risen to the top for you? We'll start with Leo. We'll come down the line, and then we'll go back.
Well, the connected autonomous vehicle issue for us is important because it's not only a safety issue for autonomous vehicles and the distracted driving and the accidents that you can avoid with autonomous vehicles. It's a technology that is coming. It's a question of when does it get here and how much penetration it has into the market. Connected vehicles are already here. We are already starting to build it into our infrastructure with signals, incorporating some of that information into our construction packages so that we can start deploying that. But it's an important feature for us because it does accommodate both the safety aspects and the congestion management aspects of vehicles that are smart and be able to deploy where we want them to be.
Yeah, I think if you look at the number of deaths in the United States on our highways, it's the equivalent of a 747 filled crashing twice a week. And if you had 2 airplane crashes a week, they'd probably halt all flights. I mean, we accept way more traffic deaths than we should. And how seatbelts? I mean, we talk about that. It's a pretty basic thing now. But how do we change people's behavior? And the distracted driving is a big issue. The speed's a big issue. In your hearings, Nolan put together the state police afterwards. I was talking to one of the state police officers. He said, well, how do we pull over a autonomous vehicle that's going too fast? And I said, it won't, right? I mean, that's the technology exists to create a safer environment. And I had an absolute horrific situation in my district on the Camp Hill bypass where a woman right around Christmas time was walking her 2 dogs and was hit by a drunk driver who was going 75 miles an hour, and she and both her dogs were killed. And the community just said enough. I mean, we have to do something to save lives, and that's a core function. And so I also think you got to balance that with there's all kinds of great innovation out there that many of you are doing, and we as the government need to help you to do that and not tie your hands either.
Because my response will be a little different since working in an executive staff position in the General Assembly, we do not get to select our issues or topics of legislation. They get assigned to us. And any transportation legislation that is ideated from a member will go through a transportation committee. And we have to own that legislation. And what I basically am responsible for is being one of the champions within the General Assembly, just like Representative Rothman is over in the House. Within the Senate, if the issue or topic of autonomous vehicles comes up, go to Nolan Ritchie. He'll point you in the right direction. So that's really how I try to provide a distinct role within the legislature. And I love talking about the issue. I have been working on the issue now for about over 2 years, very intensely, with drafting, iterations of legislation. And I know you did mention a few bills, but those are the final products that you see as the public. But on our side, we see hundreds of drafts that are continuously being negotiated and trying to find that right balance and basically holding our bosses accountable to legislation that is prepared for them to manage as well.
So do you think that there is already public acceptance of this technology to the point where it's ready to go onto the roadways? Or if not, what other work do you think needs to be done to gain that public acceptance? And Nolan, we'll start with you this time and go down the other direction.
Well, I'll be honest and say I have yet to hear any constituent call, email, stop in to say, stop the testing in Pennsylvania. With that said, I know that there have been some national surveys, with the last being 63%, I believe, of respondents said they are basically not afraid of the technology. But at the same time, with what has happened in other places, not only in Arizona, but there have also been accidents in Pennsylvania as well. Maybe not to the degree of a death, but that will certainly change the windfall on how we are going to manage this moving forward. And I know my boss, he does feel more comfortable with the evolutionary process of this type of legislation. Pennsylvania does not, let me repeat, does not have any legislative statutory authority for driverless vehicles. Uber is doing it because they are within the current confines of the law. So my boss, he has been more agreeable to legislation that has been sponsored by Representative Rothman, and there's a companion bill in the Senate from Senator Pat Brown, who's the appropriations chair, and I do expect that type of legislation to get done this session.
Well, so we spent, Greg Moreland's here from the transportation staff, and we spent time sort of gaming what would be the opposition and trying to figure out who would be opposed to our legislation. And for lack of better terms, we talked about Mothers Against Drunk Driving. I mean, the people who are Mothers of America or whatever, who people say, oh my gosh, I don't want a computer driving my car, or how can a computer be, what if it's hacked? Well, by the way, I was at another presentation this summer about hacking of your computer system, and pretty much, unless you're driving a 1972 or earlier car, your car has been hacked. They've already figured out how to do it. They can stop your car, they can brake the car, they can speed it up, they can open your windows. The presentation I saw this summer was unbelievable about what the hackers can do to your car because it's computer based. And all you need to do is have Bluetooth or the OnStar and then get into your car. So, but one horrible accident like the Uber or the Tesla or the other driverless vehicle accidents, and you could see, because we are politicians and we represent our constituents, and nobody, there's a lot of risk adverse in elected officials. You get 20 or 30 phone calls saying, I don't want a computer driving a car through my neighborhood. And you could see legislation ground to a halt. So I think it's educating the public. We already have the technology, and we're using it with lane changing notifications, your rear view mirrors, your parking assist, and as I said, when you fly in an airplane, it's on autopilot most of the time. So, but we have to be aware of people's concerns. We have to address it. I mean, I had one member say about the platooning legislation, hey, my constituents care about safety, and we got a lot of trucks coming through my community, and how are we going to, this is about safety. How am I going to respond to them? I said, well, if you care about safety, then you want to have this technology in trucks, because there are way too many accidents involving truck drivers, and a lot of it has to do with distractions and human behavior. So,
I would say the public acceptance is key and critical for widespread deployment. Where testing is going on and where it's being deployed, certainly in California and Phoenix, where Google is pretty active in Phoenix, and where people see it in Pittsburgh, and where they see the cars in Pittsburgh, it's become second nature, and they see the car and they're not afraid of it. They're willing and more than willing to get into a autonomous vehicle. I think the critical part is and it is a role for government to make sure that the vehicles that are testing and being deployed and accepting passengers for this thing, that the role of the government is to make sure that company is within certain guidelines and performing the way you would expect it to perform. Whether that is both a federal and a state responsibility to ensure that, I think.
So, talk a little bit about this issue. I know the legislature and PennDOT have been partnering for many years on different topics, but has the partnership that's developed over, the course of this topic, has it changed the dynamics of the partnering, willingness to partner between PennDOT and the legislature, and what do you think has been gained through that interaction? We'll start with you, Leo, and come down this way.
Sure. I think PennDOT has been a partner with certainly the two committees. I know we've had with our autonomous vehicle group, we've had periodic meetings with the staffs, the executive directors of the committees to talk about our issues. We're an interest group as well as the any other person is, the insurance industry or anyone else. We have issues that we'd like to see addressed in the bill. And part of the job of the legislature for Representative Rothman and the executive directors is to craft a bill that can get enough the votes enough in order to get it passed, and that satisfies and does, I'll call it, the least amount of damage for people, that they can feel pretty comfortable with the legislation that's there. I think we have been a pretty good partner with the legislature.
Yeah, I had very little expectation and didn't understand, but I'm pretty good at math, so I understand you got to have 102 votes in the House and, I don't know, 26 in the Senate and 1 signature from the governor. So I've been thrilled with this Secretary of Transportation, Leslie Richards, who's outstanding, not just on this issue, but every issue involving transportation, and working with us. I mean, it's really been exciting to see that that partnership, and of course the Senate and Chairman Rafferty, who's allowed, I mean, I would say, encouraged and allowed Nolan to become the expert of this in the Senate, and it really is collaborative, and that's for where you sit. That's important, because there are way too many issues in the legislature and in government that are toxic and are polarizing, and that we're not working together. And it's refreshing that there's this civility, and that we are working together to do the right thing.
I guess there are a few ways I could probably answer this question, but I guess the best way for me to describe the relationship, especially from where I sit, looking at maybe my type of classification of being a policymaker, trying to draft the policies, trying to understand what the analysis behind the policies, and looking to the legislators as the role of lawmakers. They're the ones who are basically going to put this into effect as a law, voting or not, and then looking at PennDOT as the implementer. But throughout that entire process, obviously with PennDOT being the implementer, we have to collaborate to understand what they can do in the implementation aspects. But we don't always agree. But I think we do have a very interesting relationship between PennDOT, state police, other state sister agencies, with the transportation committees, which the transportation chairs and executive directors and staff, we do get along fairly well, I would say, probably in comparison to other types of committees. But in that type of collaboration, I think that's where we do have to voice concerns in a trustworthy manner, understanding that where we may be at with trying to define a policy, PennDOT may not be ready yet, and the industry may not be ready yet either. So it's obviously very critical to have a conversation with PennDOT and with the legislature as well.
So with that strong partnership and relationship that all three of you just described, is there a role, do you see something to gain from collaborating groups like the Automated Vehicle Coalition we talked about today?
I would say from a technical aspect, absolutely. The two presentations that were given to kick off this event, right by me. So bringing it down to our level, I think, is the most important element, and having that type of collaboration, because I think we definitely have a good understanding of where policies need to be formed, but understanding from the technical aspect, and should we be legislating for the technicality, or just defer to PennDOT to draft policy and or regulation. So having that expertise, having that foresight of trying to anticipate where we might run into hurdles. But then again, with the coalition being one stakeholder, and I think as it was mentioned, there are over 100 different stakeholders that we are collaborating with. So what role will you play? Are you going to play the role of providing research? Are you going to provide the role of lobbying? I mean, there are some, in my opinion, serious conversations that the coalition will need to have in how they want to network with us.
Yeah, I think the coalition is very important, and it's important because we have a lot of priority. I mean, we're here talking about transportation. The other day I was in a meeting with the Department of Agriculture on modernizing the dog license laws in Pennsylvania. I mean, we have all kinds of bills sitting in the House in that 10-day period that we're in, that there are groups meeting just like this that want the attention. And I got 4 kids now, so I mean I get how you got to divide your attention. But that's it. Really is about the squeaky wheel getting the oil, and because for us, we're still politicians, and we react, and also the technology's drastically changing, and you're in the middle of that, and you need to let us know so that we can help you to innovate and help you to to be able to continue to grow. So I think it's key that you come together.
And I would agree. I think the coalition is an important partner to have with the legislation that needs to come through the House and the Senate. I think it's an important partner for PennDOT to have that. There is a vast industry out there of auto companies that want to be tech companies, and tech companies want to be auto companies. And so we have to have a funnel of information so that so as legislation is being drafted or tweaked after it's being drafted, that it is all going in the right direction.
We have just a couple of minutes left with this group. I'm sorry, did you want to add something else?
Well, no, I wanted to say there is also needs to be open source collaboration in this technology, which I think will make everyone better.
Hi. Obviously, there's still a lot that needs to be done at the technology level as far as autonomous vehicles. And Mr. Bagley, you touched briefly on this, but at the infrastructure-wise, what is the state doing with autonomous vehicle developers as far as traffic signal and roadway designs to ensure safety, and what are you finding concerning?
One of the things we're looking at right now is I'll call it a CAV policy. The strategic plans have both been completed for ITS and for CAV, and now we're looking to the implementation of it. As I mentioned, we're defining the backbone system for fiber across the state. With that will come initially an interstate policy of what gets included on any kind of a construction or new construction or reconstruction of interstate or an expressway system, so that we can incorporate either conduit and or fiber. The kind of devices you want to have out there. Since we have a huge system, there's going to be priorities put on both the projects that get the inclusion of everything versus other ones that may have a little bit less in. It gets to be an expensive endeavor. As I mentioned, we let out about $2.5 billion worth of construction projects a year. We could probably, the needs are probably far outweighed even by that. I can tell you on the interstate system, we spend about $500 million a year on the interstate system. Right now, our need just to where we should be for a state of good repair is well over $1 billion a year. So it's an issue for us on how we spend our money, and the priorities of it and how we do it out of our strategic plans is an important element of it. So we have that in mind.
And Eric, can I just follow up on another comment too, which I think needs to be stressed? Liability. Liability is probably one of the most challenging legislative issues that we will have to address. And right now, technically, PennDOT would not be liable if there would not be a line painted correctly. Is that accurate? Is that right? I'm not sure. Why is the industry pushing us to paint lines, which PennDOT, I believe, may have to reverse an existing policy? So now the industry is demanding more resources, more taxpayer dollars to allow for this technology, which is not widespread. Who is liable? Will it be the manufacturers? Will it be a person who will have no control except to give waypoints? Will it be the local government, which may not have enough resources to handle a court case? So the liability, in my opinion, is one of the most significant legislative issues that we will have to address.
Yeah, the insurance company, the insurance industry is a major stakeholder, and they have questions, and not just, it's not enough for me to just say, hey, the autonomous vehicles won't have accidents. What happens if someone who's driving a car hits I don't know, the one I was out at Stanford was, I think, $1 million. I mean, they probably go up beyond that. What happens if you destroy $1 million worth of equipment in your car hitting an autonomous vehicle? I mean, who pays for that? Your insurances. It doesn't. The limits wouldn't cover that. So who's going to be responsible for that? So.
Hi, I'm Barry Einsick with Cisco Systems Global Automotive and Transportation. GM Cadillac has already started selling connected vehicle technologies into the United States, so we have some on the roads in Pennsylvania now. Volkswagen has announced 2019. Toyota has announced 2020. Connected vehicles are the precursor to automated vehicles, and connected vehicles will be on our roads next year. They're on our roads right now. Do you feel like we're doing enough to enable those vehicles? Because if you go into the DMV and you look at how many Toyotas and how many Volkswagens are in Pennsylvania today, and you divide that by 15 years, the life cycle of a vehicle, that's how many vehicles in the next 15 years we'll have on our roads that'll be connected. And that's just the ones that have announced. There are more coming.
I have a baseball story. At the University of Michigan, the baseball field is all AstroTurf, and I'm an outfielder. The warning track is brown, and it's the same AstroTurf. And I'm thinking, it's supposed to be about your feet. You're not looking down. How do you feel the they say, well, you know, if you don't have the road markings, you know, how does the vehicle know? And if you don't have the light system, and I mean, we need that. That's the infrastructure. That's as important as the roads are. And I mean, I've talked to a couple different groups. I'd love to get 3M to develop a line painting system and then donate it to Pennsylvania and say we're going to test it here in Pennsylvania and become the standard throughout the world. I mean, that's the innovation that would be, and it won't cost taxpayer dollar, and we'll experiment on it in Pennsylvania.
I would say for the connected vehicles, particularly for smart signals, the way the signaling system and the payment for the signals in Pennsylvania works is PennDOT doesn't own any signals. We authorize them, we warrant them to put them in, but it's up to the municipality to put that signal in. A new signal costs upwards of $200,000 for a municipality. We have a program that does provide some funding for repairing and upgrading old signals. It doesn't put in for new signals. We have a new corridor project that we're piloting in the Philadelphia area, a system of roads that are parallel to the Schuylkill Expressway from King of Prussia to Philadelphia, where we are going to own those signals. There's 160 signals in 9 municipalities. That's some of the complexities of deploying technology in Pennsylvania, is that you have 2,000 municipalities that really, in the end, are controlling the signals. We have about, I think the number is like 12,000 traffic signals in Pennsylvania that are owned by 1,000 municipalities. So it becomes an expense for either PennDOT or the municipality to upgrade these things. There is a long curve, because most municipalities, if they have to choose between a $250,000 signal to put CAV technology in, or one that just goes green, red, yellow, they'll probably pick the green, red, yellow one. As part of our policy, though, that we're looking at is how do we make that in there? There's a story I've told before about I was in a meeting in Detroit a couple of years ago with the Connected Autonomous Vehicle Committee for a national organization, and the auto companies were all there. There were probably 10 or 12 states there, with most secretaries were there from those 10 or 12 states there, and I was with our secretary. And one of the auto companies said, well, all you guys need to do is upgrade your signals. All you need to do is upgrade your signals. And so one of the states, one of the counties, it was Maricopa County from Arizona. The director of transportation was there, and she says, we don't own this. She says, the states don't own the signals. We own the signals. Who's paying for our signals? And the auto companies just sort of looked at each other and go, well, I thought you were. And then the secretaries go, I thought you were. And then who's painting all the lines? Because now all of a sudden we've spent about $20 million a year on line painting, and if the system technology in the Caltrans, the director of Caltrans was there, saying that he's asked the paint companies, the testers, tell us what kind of paint you want, and they wouldn't tell him, because if they knew what was in the paint, they would know the system they're using to test the vehicles. So they've already gone to wider lines in California, but for us to, when you see some of our roads where we paint them once a year, and the auto companies now want to do it, well, you need to be doing it 2 or 3 times a year. Who's paying for that? So we have an issue that I think needs to, it's the come to Jesus speech here at some point of who's paying for what in the room. So.
And I guess I'll just offer two different perspectives in my response. The first is, since this conference is focused on Internet of Things, I guess, how is the vehicle connected to things? I can understand that a highly automated vehicle may understand how to connect to a traffic signal, but how does it connect or disconnect to grandma on a scooter with 2 dogs? How does it recognize that? And not to say that we would, or I would recommend legislation to govern that, but we might have legislation that might increase penalties if you do hit that vulnerable highway user. I guess from a second element of connected, where we are right now with the Teslas and the autopilots, from my perspective, the drivers are severely not informed of what the technology can do. And it is, in my opinion, and even my recommendation, that we might have to start governing what that new licensing process may look like for a person to understand that they cannot fall asleep behind the wheel with autopilot on. And we are hearing crash after crash with Teslas. We have met with Tesla, and I have raised this concern before. So while the autopilot may be connected to things, I think there is a significant responsibility of the driver, and I don't think we can really see that type of difference until we are at a level 5, completely driverless.
Gentlemen, thank you for your time coming here today. Thanks for your comments today. I think they really help us set the stage for the rest of the day, and appreciate the time you took out of your schedule to join us. Please give us another round of applause for our